At 55, your portfolio is the biggest it's ever been. And for the first time in your investing life, that size is working against you. Not because you have too much, but because the rules governing what happens to that money just changed completely and nobody sent you the memo. The version of Invest More that made you wealthy between 35 and 55 will cost you that wealth between 55 and 73 if you keep running the same play. I want to be precise about the claim I'm making here. I'm not saying stop investing. I'm saying the specific strategy of dumping more money into the same tax-deferred accounts with the same aggressive equity allocation, operating on the assumption that you'll work until 65 and withdraw calmly on your own terms, that strategy has an approximately 60% chance of collapsing. Not because of bad luck, because of math, timing, and three forces that activate at 55 that were completely irrelevant at 35. And I'm going to show you all three with numbers. I've run a business for over 10 years. I've had accountants, fiscal lawyers, and tax strategists in my office explaining exactly how money moves in the back half of a career. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested right now. I have skin in this. And the thing that surprised me most when I started going deep on the retirement math wasn't anything exotic. It was how badly the conventional wisdom serves the exact people it claims to help, the ones who actually did the right thing early and built something worth protecting. Here's the metaphor I want you to hold in your head for this entire video, because I'm going to come back to it every time the math clicks into place. Think of your retirement savings like a garden. You've been planting and watering it for 30 years. At 55, it's the most beautiful garden you've ever had. Rows of green, everything you put in showing up as real, visible wealth. And right now, someone is telling you, plant everything, go maximum, pack in every seed you have while you still can. And here's the part they don't mention. It's October. You have maybe 10 weeks of growing season left before the first frost. The best gardeners at 55 aren't frantically planting more seeds. They're rethinking the harvest. And if you plant everything you have in October, the frost takes it all. The October garden, that's the frame. Hold it. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something about required minimum distributions that will make you genuinely angry at whoever told you to max your 401k in your final working decade. But first, let me show you why the timing of your returns is more important than the size of your portfolio, and why that changes everything about what investing more actually does after 55. You think the amount is the problem. The actual problem is the sequence. Here's a thought experiment. Wade Pfau, a professor of retirement income at the American College of Financial Services, ran in his research. Two retirees hold identical portfolios and earn the same average return over 20 years, but still end up with drastically different account balances simply because one faced losses in the early years while the other faced them later. Same money, same average return, different sequence, completely different outcomes, and Paul's research directly quantified the impact. The compounded return in the first 10 years of retirement accounts for about 77% of the final retirement outcome. 77%. The entire back half of your retirement is determined by what happens in the first 10 years, not by the total size of your portfolio. This is where the October garden starts making sense. When you're 35 and the market drops 30%, that frost is annoying but not fatal. Your paycheck keeps coming in. When you're saving, market drops are an opportunity. A 30% decline at age 35 is mostly noise by age 55. You buy more shares at lower prices. You wait. Compounding recovers the loss and then some. But when you're withdrawing, the math flips. A 30% decline in year 2 of retirement means you're locking in losses every time you sell shares for income. The portfolio never gets a fair chance to recover. The American College of Financial Services identified the retirement risk zone, the final 10 years of working life and the first 10 years of retirement. This 20-year span is when nest eggs are both at their fullest and most vulnerable to loss. You're right in the middle of it at 55, and this vulnerability exists because of a relative lack of time for an asset to recover, compared to assets that may experience negative movement more than a decade before retirement. Now consider what happened to people who retired in early 2025. The S&P 500 returned roughly 17.9% in 2025 on a total return basis. But the index dropped nearly 19% in the first half of 2025 before recovering to finish well in the green. Anyone who retired in March of that year and started drawing income immediately got the bad half first. They sold shares at the bottom to pay rent, then watched those same shares recover to all-time highs. But they'd already sold them. That's sequence risk in the real world. And here's where the conventional advice breaks down completely. Most retirees assume more stocks equals more growth equals more spending. The data says the opposite during the risk zone. Morningstar's research showed the highest sustainable withdrawal rates came from portfolios with 30 to 50% in stocks, not 70 or 80. The extra equity adds volatility, and in the wrong sequence, that volatility eats withdrawals. So what does investing more after 55 actually mean in this context? If you're dumping extra money into equity-heavy tax-deferred accounts at 55 because someone told you to maximize the growth decade before retirement, you're planting more seeds in October. You're increasing the size of the position that's now sitting in the highest risk window of your entire financial life. More seeds, same frost exposure, bigger loss. There's a story about a farmer in Nebraska, not someone I know personally, but the kind of story that gets passed around in actuarial circles because it captures something mathematically true. He spent 40 years building a farm. Every year, he reinvested everything. At 62, he had the most productive soil he'd ever seen, the most equipment, the most capacity, and someone convinced him to plant every acre he owned that October, right before an early frost that year hit. He lost 60% of it. The soil was never the problem. It was extraordinary soil. The problem was what he planted, when he planted it, and the fact that he didn't hedge a single acre. His neighbor, same soil, planted 60%, kept 40% in cold storage from the previous harvest, and came through fine. The difference wasn't work ethic. The difference wasn't even net worth. It was understanding that October has its own rules. The October garden, by the way, hit subscribe if you're finding this useful. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Now here's the part that I said would make you angry, and I meant it. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything about how you should be thinking about a 401k contribution at 55. Here's what nobody mentions when they tell you to max your pre-tax retirement contributions in your 50s. There's a guest arriving at your retirement party at age 73. His name is required minimum distribution. He doesn't knock, he doesn't ask. Once you reach age 73, you must begin taking annual RMDs from all tax-deferred retirement accounts, including 401k plans, 403b plans, and similar workplace retirement plan accounts. The IRS mandates a minimum withdrawal every single year, calculated by dividing your December 31st balance by your life expectancy factor. You can't defer it. You can't delay taking your RMD. There have been only 2 one-year exceptions to this rule, the first during the 2009 financial crisis, and the second at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. That's it. Everyone else pays up. Here's where the math gets brutal. Using the IRS Uniform Lifetime Table Divisor of 26.5 at age 73, a $1.5 million balance produces a required distribution of $56,604. That's year one. But the Uniform Lifetime Table shrinks each year. Divisors run 25.5 at 74, 24.6 at 75, 23.7 at 76, and they keep tightening into the 80s. So your forced withdrawal gets larger every year against a portfolio that might also be shrinking due to market conditions you can't control. Run the schedule from 73 to 90 in cumulative RMDs on a $1.5 million portfolio, land near $1.4 million. Every dollar of that is ordinary income. Every dollar, ordinary income taxed at your marginal rate, not capital gains rates, not favorably at whatever bracket all that money pushes you into. And if your Social Security is already in payment, which it likely is, adding $56,000 or $70,000 or $90,000 in forced withdrawals starts making a portion of your Social Security taxable too. The government is double dipping, legally, And it's fully sanctioned by a tax code that was specifically designed with this in mind. RMDs allow the government to tax money that's been protected in a retirement account, potentially for decades. After such a long period of compounding, the government wants to be sure it eventually gets its cut. Now think about what this means for someone who listened to their financial advisor between 55 and 65 and aggressively maxed their pre-tax 401k contributions during those 10 years. They grew a much larger balance, which means much larger RMDs, which means a bigger tax event starting at 73. If you delay your first RMD to April 1st, you'll end up taking 2 RMDs in the same calendar year, the prior years by April 1st and the current years by December 31st. That can bump you into a higher tax bracket. And if you've never done a Roth conversion between now and then, you're going to spend years handing the IRS money you spent decades carefully accumulating. There's a specific parable for this. A merchant in 18th century London ran a system where he allowed his best customers to defer all payments until the end of their lives. The customers loved it. They could buy everything now, pay nothing now, grow their businesses now. But the deferred payment didn't disappear. It compounded. And at the end of life, the estate owed not just the original amount, but decades of accumulated interest. The merchant's heirs became very wealthy. The customer's heirs paid the bill. The 401k isn't a gift from the government. It's a deferred payment plan. And the longer you wait to start converting some of it to Roth, the bigger the bill you're signing for. The October Garden has a hidden rule. Frost doesn't care how many seeds you planted. It bills you for all of them at once. Here's the honest confession that never makes it into a retirement calculator. You can read everything I just said and understand it completely, and still do nothing about it, because knowing a risk and building a system around it are two very different problems. I built a digital book called The Exit Code. It's the result of going through 50 years of retirement data and distilling it into a mathematical framework for figuring out exactly when and how you can exit the workforce on your terms, not the market's. One of the chapters focuses specifically on what I call the dynamic withdrawal method, a system that replaces the 4% rule with something that actually accounts for the sequence of returns problem I just described. Morningstar's December 2025 research, by the way, put the optimal withdrawal rate for people retiring in 2026 at 3.9%, not 4%, which means the rule you were probably planning around is already slightly wrong before you even start. The book also walks through what I call the 58% rule, the reality that roughly 3 in 5 workers exit the workforce earlier than they planned, usually involuntarily, and the buffer strategy that protects you when that happens to you. It costs less than a dinner out. The link is in the description. Now, the invisible bill. The one that will absolutely force you to sell assets at the wrong time if you haven't planned for it. And with the calendar flipping to 2026, this bill just got bigger than it's been in years. Healthcare. Before Medicare. That gap between whenever you actually stop working and age 65, health insurance can represent one of the largest expenses for individuals who retire before age 65. Monthly premiums of roughly $1,000 to $1,100 per person can meaningfully affect how long retirement savings last, especially when combined with other core costs such as housing, food, and transportation. Wait, that was last year's number. Here's this year's. At age 60, you could pay $19,176 per year for health insurance if you're shopping for your own plan and don't qualify for discounts. Health insurance costs an average of $1,691 per month at age 62 and $1,766 per month at age 64 for one person. Now, double it for a couple. A couple in their early 60s, both uninsured, retiring without employer coverage, who plan to be fine because they have savings. They're staring at roughly $40,000 per year in health insurance premiums before they pay a single copay, deductible, or prescription. For 2026, the out-of-pocket limit for marketplace plans cannot exceed $10,600 for an individual and $21,200 for a family. That's the maximum additional exposure on top of premiums. Add it up for a couple, and you're potentially looking at $61,200 in a single bad health year, just in insurance-related costs. And now, here's the part that got significantly worse in 2026 specifically. At the end of 2025, the enhanced premium tax credits that had lowered ACA premiums since 2021 expired and were not renewed. For early retirees, this means the subsidy cliff at 400% of the federal poverty level is back. So anyone earning above roughly $62,600 as a single person in 2026 pays full price for marketplace coverage, which can exceed $1,500 a month at age 62 in some rating areas. Most people who retire at 62 with a solid portfolio will have income above that threshold from their withdrawals, dividends, and maybe a small pension, which means they pay full price, which means the savings they're living on is being bled out continuously every month into health insurance before the market even gets a chance to hurt them. Think about what this creates in sequence of returns terms. You need $40,000 a year for healthcare. You're retired. Your only source of income is your portfolio. A market correction hits in year 2 of retirement. Your portfolio drops 20%, but you still need that $40,000. So you sell shares at the bottom to pay your insurance premium. You are permanently locking in losses to cover a cost that compounds against you every year until age 65. This is the frost eating the October garden in real time. There's a plumber I know of a real story from a financial planner's client base, shared as an anonymized case study, who retired at 62 with $500,000 saved, which for a blue-collar worker represented 30-something years of careful discipline. He was proud of it. His financial advisor told him he was on track. What nobody modeled was the healthcare cost. The first year of retirement, he paid $22,000 in premiums and out-of-pocket costs. Market dropped that same year. He sold $38,000 in fund shares at a loss to cover expenses. By year 3, his $500,000 was down to $380,000. Not because of bad investing, because of a cost he didn't account for during a sequence of returns that hit him early. He went back to work at 64, not because he wanted to, because the numbers forced him. This is your retirement system working exactly as designed. The fund companies got their fees. The insurance companies got their premiums. The IRS will get their RMDs starting at 73. The only person who didn't get what they planned for was the one who listened to generic advice and trusted a 4% withdrawal rate built on assumptions from 1994. The October Garden is telling you something. More seeds isn't the answer. The frost doesn't negotiate. Now let me tell you about a subplot that runs through all of this, because I want you to understand it isn't hypothetical. Let me call him Derek. Derek is 56. He works in project management at a mid-sized company. He's been there 11 years. His 401k balance is $280,000. He's been contributing the maximum since he turned 51, including the catch-up contribution, which currently sits at $8,000 annually for people over 50, on top of the standard $23,500 limit. If you're 50 or older, you can contribute an additional $1,100 to an IRA and $8,000 to a 401k or 403b in catch-up contributions for 2026. Derek read that and thought, perfect. I'll maximize every year I have left. He's planning to work until 65. He's 9 years away. He feels secure. Here's what Derek doesn't know yet. I'll come back to him. Now let me tell you about the third problem, the one that makes everything else worse, because it removes the one assumption your entire plan rests on, the assumption that you get to choose when you stop working. A 2024 report from the Trans-America Center for Retirement Studies found that nearly 3 out of 5 retirees left the workforce sooner than they expected. 3 out of 5. Not a rounding error, not a statistical anomaly, a majority. And it wasn't because they got bored. About 5 years separates what Americans plan and what happens. Non-retirees target 66 as their retirement age. Most retire at 61. That difference is driven mostly by unplanned exits. 24% of people over 50 who are laid off never find another job. 1 in 4. Not temporarily displaced. Gone from the workforce permanently. typically converting to early Social Security at a permanent 30% reduction in monthly benefits. For workers between the ages of 55 and 64, the average time for being unemployed is almost 26 weeks, nearly 7 weeks longer than it is for 25 to 34-year-olds. For men in that older age group, it's even longer, 33 weeks or more than 8 months. And the trajectory is getting worse, not better. In 2024, the EEOC received 16,223 charges of age discrimination, an increase from the 14,144 charges reported in 2023 and the 11,500 charges reported in 2022, a 40% increase in 3 years. About 2/3, 64% of workers age 50 plus have reported seeing or experiencing age discrimination in the workplace. 22% feel like they are being pushed out of their jobs because of their age. So here's the kicker. The investment plan that most people make at 55, aggressive contributions, equity-heavy allocation, 10-year runway, controlled exit at 65, has a 60% probability of not unfolding the way they designed it. The timeline gets cut short. The portfolio has to start withdrawing earlier. The healthcare gap is longer than expected. The sequence of returns hits during the forced exit, not on schedule. And the RMD Time Bomb was set when they were 58, blindly maxing the pre-tax account. And it detonates at 73 no matter what happened in between. You think the problem is the amount of money. The actual problem is that you're building a plan around conditions you probably won't get to control. Derek finds out at 59, restructuring. His role is eliminated. He has $280,000 in a pre-tax 401k, no access to Medicare for 6 more years, and the enhanced ACA tax credits that existed when he made his retirement plan have expired. He's looking at roughly $19,000 a year in healthcare premiums on the marketplace at his age and income level. He has 2 options: take an early withdrawal from the 401k and pay the 10% penalty plus ordinary income tax, or drain his after-tax savings first while watching his pre-tax balance grow into an even bigger RMD problem at 73. The thing about October is the frost doesn't wait for you to be ready. Now let's put actual numbers on a realistic scenario, because I want you to be able to see yourself in this. Marcus is 55. He earns $95,000 a year. He has $280,000 saved across a 401k and a traditional IRA. He's been contributing consistently, but not maximally. His financial advisor just told him the next 10 years are critical. Max out every available contribution. You've got the catch-up contributions available now. Hit them hard. Marcus wants to retire at 65. He trusts the advice. He starts contributing $31,500 annually, maximum, into pre-tax accounts. Scenario A. Marcus follows this advice for 10 years, retires at 65 on schedule. His balance at 65, assuming a 7% average annual return, reaches approximately $800,000. On the 4% rule, that's $32,000 per year in withdrawals. Add Social Security, say $18,000 a year if he claims at 65. He's living on $50,000 a year. Manageable, if tight. But then age 73 arrives. His balance has grown to about $1,200,000 if he's careful. His first RMD, $45,283, taxed as ordinary income on top of his Social Security. His Social Security becomes partially taxable. His Medicare premiums get hit with IRMA surcharges if his income crosses $85,000. The government is collecting on a debt Marcus didn't even know he owed. Scenario B. Marcus, at 55, splits his contributions. He puts $15,000 into his pre-tax 401k to capture the full employer match, and simultaneously begins moving money from his traditional IRA into a Roth through annual conversions, staying deliberately inside the 22% tax bracket. He builds a liquidity buffer in a taxable brokerage account with a year's worth of expenses. He shifts his asset allocation from 70-30 to 50-50 as he approaches 60, building cash and bond ladders, specifically designed to cover the first 2 years of retirement without selling equities. The total investment dollars are nearly the same as scenario A. But the tax structure, the liquidity position, and the sequence of returns exposure are fundamentally different. In scenario B, if Marcus gets laid off at 60, he doesn't panic sell equities. He draws from the cash buffer. His Roth grows tax-free and has no RMD requirement. His taxable events at 73 are far smaller. And if he does need to withdraw from the portfolio during a market downturn, he takes from the bond ladder first, not the equities. He doesn't eat the frost. He has a greenhouse. The difference between scenario A and scenario B isn't the amount Marcus invested. It's the structure of that investment. It's the sequence management. It's the October garden being planted with cold weather crops instead of summer tomatoes. This is a good moment to pause and say something directly. The financial media and the retirement industry have a shared interest in telling you to invest more. More assets under management means more fees. More pre-tax contributions means more deferred tax liability the government will eventually collect. More equity exposure means more transaction activity. Nobody in that ecosystem is incentivized to say the structure matters more than the amount. Morningstar's December 2025 research announced 3.9% as the optimal rate for those retiring in 2026, down from the 4% that's been quoted uncritically for 30 years. The 4% rule was developed in 1994, when bond yields were different, life expectancies were shorter, and healthcare costs weren't capable of taking out a retiree's savings in 3 years of bad luck. Bengen assumed that retirement savings should last 30 years to account for longevity risk. But today, savings may need to last 35, even 40 years. You are likely to live longer than the formula that governs your plan. I promised you 3 practical takeaways that are specific to this exact situation. Not generic diversify your portfolio advice, actual mechanical decisions. First, if you are between 55 and 62 and you have a meaningful traditional 401k or IRA balance, start modeling your Roth conversion window now. Every year between now and age 73 that you convert pre-tax dollars to Roth, deliberately filling up your current tax bracket without crossing into a higher one is a dollar that will never show up as a forced RMD. For tax year 2025, if you're a joint filer in the federal 24% tax bracket and you have $250,000 in taxable income after taking the standard deduction, you could withdraw another $144,600 from your tax-deferred accounts and stay in your current tax bracket. You have room. The question is whether you use it before 73 forces you to. Second, build a healthcare bridge fund before you call yourself retirement ready. Calculate your monthly uninsured premium at the age you might realistically stop working. Not the age you plan to, but the age you might be pushed to. The average cost of health insurance at age 60 is $1,598 per month. Multiply by 12, multiply by however many years you'd need to bridge to Medicare. For a couple, potentially retiring at 60, that's 3 years. 2 people, over $115,000 in premiums alone, not counting deductibles. That money needs to sit somewhere liquid outside your retirement accounts, where a market crash can't make you sell assets to pay a premium. Third, stress test your exit plan against an involuntary departure at 60, not 65, because nearly 3 out of 5 retirees left the workforce sooner than they expected. And the plan that only works if you get to choose the timing is a plan with a 60% probability of failing before it starts. Ask yourself, if I lose my job at 60, what do I draw from first? What does my healthcare cost? What does my sequence of returns exposure look like if I start withdrawing 2 years earlier than modeled? If the answer to any of those questions is, I haven't thought about it, that's not a math problem. That's a planning problem. And the math you're doing right now, investing more into the same pre-tax accounts, is making that planning problem worse, not better. Here's what happened to Derek, finally. He retools at 60. He picks up contract work, not the same salary, but enough to cover expenses without touching the portfolio for 2 years. He converts $60,000 of his 401k to Roth each of those 2 years. Paying tax now at the 22% bracket, rather than later at whatever rate applies when RMDs force the issue at 73. He moves 18 months of expenses into a high-yield savings account as a healthcare and sequence of returns buffer. He delays claiming Social Security to 67, using the bridge to cover the gap. It's not the retirement he planned, but it's functional and it's protected. Derek figured it out. Most people don't, because nobody told them the game changed at 55. The financial industry will give you a complimentary portfolio review and tell you to invest more. Your 401k provider will send you notifications about catch-up contributions. Your advisor will reference the 4% rule without telling you Morningstar just revised it downward. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And lazy investing, done correctly, means understanding that after 55, the smart moves look passive from the outside Roth conversions, liquidity buffers, sequence management, healthcare bridge funds, but they're doing more financial work than any aggressive contribution you could make. The October garden doesn't need more seeds. It needs a cold frame, a root cellar, and someone who knows what kind of crop survives a frost. Derek figured that out. Don't wait for the frost to teach you. Script word count, approximately 5,200